Most people believe their problem is a lack of talent, a lack of time, or a lack of opportunity. But that's not the truth. The real problem is hesitation. Dreams are not destroyed by failure. They are destroyed by delay. Every day you wait, your confidence weakens, your ideas fade, and someone else moves forward. Success does not belong to the smartest person in the room. It belongs to the person who starts, not next week, not when conditions are perfect. Now. This audiobook will show you why starting immediately is the most powerful advantage you will ever have, and how the simple decision to act today can change the entire direction of your life. Chapter 1: Stop Waiting for Motivation. Let's start with a truth most people don't want to hear. Motivation is not the beginning of success. Action is. Most people have the order completely backwards. They sit around waiting to feel motivated before they start. They believe motivation is some magical emotional state that arrives first and then action follows. But that's not how the real world works. In the real world, motivation is a result. It's the reward that appears after you move, not before. Action creates motivation, not the other way around. That's the key. Look around at the people who actually accomplish things, the writers who publish books, the entrepreneurs who build companies, the athletes who transform their bodies. Do you think they wake up every day feeling excited, inspired, and ready to go? Of course not. They start anyway. Because they understand something most people never learn. Motivation is unreliable. Action is not. You have a choice. You can wait for motivation or you can create it. And the only way to create it is to start moving. Action creates motivation, not the other way around. Now let's talk about momentum. Momentum is one of the most powerful forces in human behavior, but it only appears after movement begins. Think about a heavy train sitting still on the tracks. At the beginning, it takes enormous energy to get that train moving. The engine struggles. The wheels grind, the progress is slow, but once the train starts rolling, something changes. The movement becomes easier, the speed increases, and eventually the train becomes almost unstoppable. Your habits work the exact same way. The hardest moment is always the beginning, writing the first sentence. Taking the first step at the gym, opening the laptop and starting the work. That first step feels heavy because your brain is resisting effort. Your mind wants comfort, it wants delay, it wants the easy path. But once you start moving, resistance begins to fade, energy increases, focus appears. And motivation begins to grow. Action creates motivation, not the other way around. That's the key. Look at writers. No writer sits down and waits for the perfect wave of inspiration to magically appear. If they did, they would never finish anything. Instead, professional writers start with a single sentence. Just one, and once that first sentence exists, the second becomes easier. Then the third, then the fourth. Before they know it, the page is filling with ideas. Momentum has taken over. Athletes understand this too. No athlete feels excited before every workout. Many days they feel tired, distracted, unmotivated. But they follow a simple rule. They start anyway. They tell themselves, just 5 minutes, just 5 minutes of running, just 5 minutes of lifting, just 5 minutes of movement, and something interesting happens. 5 minutes becomes 10, 10 becomes 30, and suddenly the workout is complete. Momentum did the work. Action creates motivation, not the other way around. You have a choice. Start small or stay stuck. Entrepreneurs understand this lesson better than almost anyone. Many people dream about building a business. They spend months researching, watching videos, reading books, planning the perfect idea. But they never start. They're waiting for confidence. They're waiting for certainty. They're waiting for motivation. But confidence doesn't come from thinking. It comes from doing. The entrepreneur who succeeds is rarely the one with the most perfect plan. It's the one who launches something imperfect, a messy product, a rough idea, a simple first step. Because the moment they launch, they begin learning. Feedback appears, experience grows, confidence builds. Action creates motivation, not the other way around. That's the key. Now we need to talk about the most dangerous trap of all, the motivation trap. This trap has destroyed more dreams than failure ever could. Here's how it works. A person has a goal. They want to write a book, start a business, get in shape, learn a new skill. But instead of starting today, they tell themselves something very convincing. I'll start when I feel ready. It sounds reasonable. It sounds logical, but it's a lie, because readiness is an illusion. There will always be another reason to delay. You'll feel tired. You'll feel busy. You'll feel uncertain, and your brain will whisper the same excuse again. Tomorrow will be better, but tomorrow becomes next week. Next week becomes next month. Next month becomes next year, and eventually the goal disappears completely. That's the motivation trap. Waiting to feel ready becomes a permanent delay loop. If you wait to feel ready, you will wait forever. Let that sink in, forever, because the feeling you are waiting for does not come first. It comes after action. Action creates motivation, not the other way around. You don't need their permission. You don't need perfect conditions. You don't need confidence. You need one thing: movement. So what should you actually do? The answer is simple. Lower the starting line. Most people make the beginning too big, too intimidating, too demanding, so the brain resists. Instead, shrink the task until it becomes almost impossible to refuse. Don't commit to writing a book. Commit to writing one paragraph. Don't commit to an hour at the gym. Commit to 5 minutes. Don't commit to building a perfect business plan. Commit to launching one small idea. That's how momentum begins. One small action, one tiny movement, one decision, and then something powerful happens. Your brain sees progress, your mind feels accomplishment, and suddenly the work feels easier. Motivation begins to grow. Action creates motivation, not the other way around. That's the key. Understand this clearly. Success does not belong to the most motivated person. It belongs to the person who starts when they don't feel like it, because starting is the real skill. Starting is the discipline. Starting is the difference between people who dream and people who build. You have a choice. You can wait for motivation, or you can create it. You can stay stuck in preparation, or you can begin building momentum. And the moment you take that first step, no matter how small, you change the direction of your entire life, because movement breaks hesitation. Movement destroys delay. Movement creates motivation. Action creates motivation, not the other way around. Never forget that. You stopped waiting for motivation. Now it's time to understand the real cost of hesitation, because every moment of delay has a hidden price most people never see. Let's uncover it. Chapter 2: The Silent Cost of Delay. Delay is dangerous, not loud, not dramatic, not obvious. Dangerous in a quiet way, because delay does not announce its damage. It happens slowly, silently, almost invisibly, and that is exactly why it destroys so many dreams. Every day you wait has a price, not someday, not later. Today, every day you postpone action, something is happening behind the scenes. Opportunities are moving, skills are stagnating, confidence is eroding. And the most dangerous part is this: you rarely notice it while it's happening. You tell yourself a simple lie: I still have time. But time is not standing still. It is moving. And every day you delay, the gap between where you are and where you want to be becomes larger. That's the silent cost of delay. You have a choice. You can act today, or you can quietly let your future shrink. That's the key. Most people believe delay is harmless. They think waiting a few days or a few months doesn't matter, but delay compounds, just like interest in a bank account. Except in this case, it compounds in reverse. Every day you delay, you lose momentum you haven't even built yet. You lose learning you haven't experienced yet. You lose opportunities you haven't even seen yet. Think about someone who wants to start a YouTube channel. They have ideas. They have passion, they even have a camera, but they hesitate. They tell themselves they need better equipment, they need better lighting, they need more preparation, so they wait. 6 months pass, then a year. During that same year, someone else started. Their first videos were awkward. Their editing was terrible, their confidence was low, but they posted anyway. And by the end of that same year, something remarkable happened. They improved, their audience grew, their skills sharpened, their confidence expanded, not because they were more talented, but because they started earlier. That's the key. The biggest advantage in almost every field is not talent. It's time spent moving. You don't need their permission. You don't need perfect timing. You need to begin, because delay has a cost. Now let's talk about something even more dangerous, the confidence decay effect. Confidence is not a personality trait. It's not something you are born with. Confidence is built through evidence. Every time you take action and survive the experience, your brain gathers proof. Proof that you are capable. Proof that you can handle discomfort. Proof that you can improve. But when you delay action, that evidence never appears. Instead, something else grows, doubt. And the longer you postpone something, the bigger that doubt becomes. A simple task slowly transforms into something intimidating. A small step becomes a giant obstacle. And suddenly the thing you once felt excited about now feels terrifying. Delay multiplies fear. That's the key. Think about public speaking. The first time someone considers speaking in front of a group, the fear might be mild. But if they postpone it for months or years, their imagination begins to grow. They start picturing embarrassment, failure, judgment. And the longer they wait, the more terrifying the idea becomes. But here's the truth. The fear didn't grow because the task became harder. The fear grew because delay gave it space to expand. Delay multiplies fear. You have a choice. You can shrink fear with action, or you can feed fear with hesitation. It's not about courage, it's about discipline. Because the moment you take action, fear begins to weaken. But when you delay, fear begins to grow. That's the silent cost. And here's something even more important to understand. While you are waiting, life is moving. Quietly, relentlessly, without asking your permission. The world does not pause while you hesitate. Ideas are being built. Projects are being launched. Skills are being developed every single day by people who simply started earlier. Think about the creators, businesses, and innovators you admire today. Most of them didn't start with perfect plans. They started small, a blog with a few readers, a simple online store, a rough product prototype. At the beginning, almost no one noticed them, but they had something incredibly valuable, time in motion, and time in motion compounds. 5 years of consistent action beats 5 years of waiting every single time. 10 years of imperfect progress beats 10 years of perfect planning. That's the key. Because starting early gives you something powerful. Experience. Experience creates skill. Skill creates confidence. Confidence creates opportunity. But none of that exists if you delay the first step. You have a choice. You can watch the world move forward, or you can move with it. Here is the truth most people avoid. Delay feels comfortable in the moment, but it becomes painful over time. Because years later, people begin asking themselves a quiet question. What if I had started earlier? What if I had written the book? What if I had started the business? What if I had learned the skill? What if I had taken the risk? Those questions are heavy, not because failure would have been painful, but because the opportunity was never even tested. That's the silent cost of delay, regret. And regret grows in the empty space where action should have been. You don't need their permission. You don't need guarantees. You need to move, because the cost of delay is far greater than the cost of starting imperfectly. Remember this. Every day you act, your future expands. Every day you delay, your future contracts. You have a choice. Act or postpone, build or hesitate, move or watch time pass. That's the key. But here's the powerful truth. The moment you start, the silent cost disappears. The moment you move, the clock begins working for you instead of against you. Momentum begins, confidence grows, opportunities start appearing, because action changes everything. Delay multiplies fear, but action multiplies progress. And once you understand that, hesitation loses its power. You stop waiting, you stop postponing. You stop telling yourself you'll start someday, because someday is not a strategy. Today is. You now understand the cost of delay. Now it's time to understand something equally powerful. why action doesn't just move you forward, it also gives you something people desperately search for: clarity. You don't find clarity by thinking longer. You find clarity by moving. Let's talk about that. Chapter 3: Clarity comes from action. Most people believe clarity comes before action. They think they must first figure everything out: the perfect plan, the perfect timing, the perfect strategy. Only then, they say, will they begin. But this belief has stopped more people than failure ever will. Because clarity does not come before action. Clarity comes from action. That's the key. You don't think your way into clarity. You work your way into it. And until you understand this, you will remain stuck in the most comfortable prison in the world: overthinking. You have a choice. You can sit in your head forever, or you can step forward and let reality teach you. Because the truth is simple: thinking alone does not reveal the path. Walking does. You do not find the path, you walk it. Think about someone who wants to start a business. They sit at their desk with a notebook. They brainstorm ideas. They research markets. They watch endless videos about entrepreneurship. Weeks turn into months. Months turn into years, but nothing actually happens. Why? Because they believe clarity must arrive first. They believe once they have the perfect business idea, then they will begin. But the people who succeed rarely begin with clarity. They begin with experimentation. They test ideas. They launch imperfect projects. They try something small, and through action, they begin discovering what works. That's the key. The market teaches them. Customers teach them. Reality teaches them. But reality can't teach you anything if you never begin. You don't need their permission. You don't need the perfect blueprint. You need movement, because movement produces clarity. Now let's talk about the fog of inaction. This is where most people live. When you stay stuck in planning mode, your mind fills with endless possibilities. You imagine every option, every risk, every outcome, and instead of clarity, something else appears: confusion. Your brain becomes crowded with questions. What if it fails? What if the idea isn't good enough? What if people judge me? What if I choose the wrong direction? The longer you sit in that mental space, the thicker the fog becomes, and suddenly the decision feels overwhelming. But here's something powerful. The moment you take a single step forward, the fog begins to lift, because action replaces imagination with evidence. Instead of wondering what might happen, you start seeing what actually happens. And reality is always clearer than speculation. That's the key. Think about learning a new skill. Imagine someone who wants to learn graphic design. They spend months watching tutorials. They read books about design theory. They research software tools, but they rarely open the design program itself. So they remain confused, because information alone doesn't create clarity. Practice does. The moment they begin creating designs, something changes. Mistakes appear, but so does improvement. They start seeing what works, what doesn't, what they enjoy, and what they need to improve. The fog begins to disappear, not because they thought longer, but because they acted. You have a choice. Stay in the fog or start moving through it, because clarity is waiting on the other side of action. This brings us to a powerful principle successful people understand deeply: the iteration principle. Iteration means adjusting while moving. It means improving through repetition. It means learning while doing. And this is how almost every meaningful achievement actually happens, not through perfect planning, through imperfect progress. Look at technology companies. The apps you use every day did not begin as polished masterpieces. They began as rough prototypes, simple versions, basic tools, but the creators released them anyway. Then they watched what happened. They observed users, they gathered feedback, and they improved the product again and again. Iteration. Each step brought more clarity. Each version became better than the last, but none of that progress would have existed if they waited for perfection. You do not find the path, you walk it. That's the key. Writers understand this better than anyone. No writer sits down and produces a flawless book on the first attempt. They produce a first draft. And the first draft is messy, imperfect, incomplete, but it exists. And once it exists, the writer can improve it, edit it, strengthen it, rewrite it. But if they waited for perfect clarity before writing the first sentence, the book would never exist at all. That's the trap. Waiting for clarity prevents the very action that creates clarity. You have a choice. You can sit with the blank page, or you can start writing. You can keep searching for the perfect direction, or you can begin walking. Because walking reveals the direction. Thinking rarely does. Here's something important to understand. Overthinking feels productive. But it's often just a sophisticated form of avoidance. Your brain convinces you that planning is progress, that researching is progress, that analyzing every possible scenario is progress. But progress only happens when reality is involved. Reality only appears when action begins. It's not about intelligence, it's about discipline. The discipline to move before you feel certain. The discipline to start before everything is figured out. The discipline to learn while doing. You don't need their permission. You don't need guarantees. You need motion, because motion creates feedback. Feedback creates clarity, and clarity creates progress. That's the key. So what should you actually do? Simple. Stop asking, what's the perfect plan? Start asking a different question. What is the next step? Not the next 100 steps, just the next one. Open the document, make the phone call, publish the video, test the idea. Take the first step, then observe what happens. Adjust, then take the next step. Iteration, movement, progress. You do not find the path, you walk it, and every step reveals a little more of the road ahead. Understand this clearly. Clarity is not a prerequisite for action. It is the reward for action. Every successful person you admire discovered their path the same way, not by thinking longer, but by starting sooner. You have a choice. You can keep waiting for the fog to clear on its own. Or you can start walking and watch the fog disappear with every step. That's the key, because once you begin moving, everything changes. Ideas improve, confidence grows, direction becomes visible. And suddenly the thing that once felt impossible begins to feel manageable, all because you moved. You stopped waiting for motivation. You understood the silent cost of delay, and now you understand something powerful. Clarity does not come before action. Clarity comes from it, but there is one more obstacle that stops people from starting: perfection, the illusion that things must be flawless before they begin. And that illusion has trapped millions. Let's destroy it. Chapter 4, Imperfect starts beat perfect plans. Perfection is one of the most dangerous excuses in the world. It sounds intelligent, it sounds responsible, it even sounds disciplined. But most of the time, perfection is not about excellence. It's about fear. Fear of judgment, fear of criticism, fear of failure. So instead of admitting that fear, people hide behind a more respectable word: perfection. They say things like, I just need to prepare a little more. I want to make sure everything is perfect before I start. I'm waiting until the timing is right. But the truth is much simpler. Perfection is often just delay in disguise. That's the key, because perfection creates a rule that can never be satisfied. If something must be perfect before it begins, it will never begin. You have a choice. You can chase perfection, or you can create progress, and progress always wins. Let's expose the real problem. Perfectionism feels productive, but it rarely produces anything. A perfectionist can spend weeks planning a project, months researching it, years imagining how great it could be. But the actual work never starts. Why? Because the standard is impossible. If every detail must be flawless, the brain refuses to begin. The risk feels too high, the pressure feels too heavy, and so the person waits and waits and waits. That's the trap. It's not about perfection. It's about avoidance. It's not about quality. It's about hesitation. That's the key. And once you understand that, you stop respecting perfectionism. You start recognizing it for what it really is: fear wearing a professional disguise. You don't need their permission. You don't need perfect conditions. You need the courage to begin imperfectly. Now let's talk about something every creator in history understands: the first draft philosophy. Every masterpiece begins as something ugly, messy, incomplete, uncertain. The first version of anything is almost always bad. That's normal. That's expected. And that's exactly how it should be, because the purpose of the first version is not perfection. The purpose is existence. That's the key. Think about writing a book. No author sits down and produces a flawless manuscript on the first try. The first draft is rough. Ideas are scattered. Sentences are clumsy. Some sections barely make sense, but it exists, and once it exists, it can be improved, edited, refined, strengthened. But none of that can happen if the first draft never appears. The first version is supposed to be bad. It only needs to exist. Remember that. Inventors understand this deeply. The first prototype of an invention almost never works perfectly. It fails, it breaks, it reveals flaws, but those flaws are valuable because they show the inventor what needs to change. Without that first imperfect prototype, improvement cannot begin. Think about early airplanes. The first flying machines were fragile, unstable, dangerous, but they existed. And because they existed, engineers could study them, improve them, strengthen them. Eventually, those rough beginnings evolved into the aircraft that carry millions of people across the world today. But that progress began with imperfection. That's the key. Perfection does not create progress. Iteration does. The same rule applies to almost every area of life: fitness, business, creativity, skill building. Nobody starts strong. Everyone starts awkward. The first workout is uncomfortable. The first business idea is clumsy. The first video is embarrassing. The first attempt is always the weakest. And that's not a problem. That's the process. But perfectionism convinces people that the beginning must look impressive, that the first step must already resemble the final result. And that belief stops them from starting at all. You have a choice. You can demand perfection, or you can accept progress, because progress is built on imperfect attempts. That's the key. Here is the truth high performers understand. Success is not built on perfect actions. It is built on consistent imperfect actions, small improvements, repeated attempts, continuous adjustments. A person who produces 10 imperfect attempts will learn more than someone who spends years planning a single perfect attempt. It's not about flawlessness. It's about discipline. The discipline to start, the discipline to continue, the discipline to improve through repetition. You don't need their permission. You don't need perfect confidence. You don't need perfect results. You need to create something real, because once something exists, it can evolve. But an idea trapped in your head cannot improve. It can only remain imaginary. Let's bring this down to something practical. Imagine someone who wants to start a YouTube channel. They spend months thinking about it. They worry about lighting, camera quality, editing skills, presentation style. They want the first video to be impressive, professional, perfect. But here's what they don't realize. Their first video will never be their best. Not even close, because skill only improves through repetition. The first video teaches you what to fix. The second video teaches you what to improve. The 10th video shows how far you've come. The 100th video shows mastery. But none of that happens if the first video never exists. The first version is supposed to be bad. It only needs to exist. That's the key. Now understand something powerful. Perfectionism keeps you safe, but safety rarely leads to growth, because growth requires exposure. Exposure to mistakes, exposure to learning, exposure to reality. And reality is the best teacher you will ever have. You have a choice: hide behind preparation or step into the real process of improvement, because improvement only begins after action, not before. Here is a rule you must remember: start before you feel ready. Start before everything is perfect. Start before your confidence feels complete, because readiness is created through action, not preparation, not imagination, action. And the moment you start producing imperfect work, something remarkable happens. You begin learning faster. Your confidence begins to rise. Your skills begin to sharpen. Momentum appears. And the thing that once felt intimidating becomes familiar, all because you began imperfectly. That's the key. So remove the pressure. Your first attempt doesn't need to be impressive. It doesn't need to be flawless. It doesn't even need to be good, it just needs to exist. Because existence creates opportunity, opportunity creates improvement, improvement creates excellence, and excellence always begins with imperfection. You have a choice: wait for perfection or create progress, because perfect plans never built anything, but imperfect starts built everything. The companies, the books, the skills, the achievements. All of them began with a rough beginning, and once you understand that, perfection loses its power over you. You stop hesitating, you stop overthinking, you start creating, imperfectly, consistently, relentlessly. You stopped waiting for motivation. You understood the silent cost of delay. You discovered that clarity comes from action. And now you know the truth about perfection. But there's another secret behind real progress, something even more powerful. Because big success rarely begins with big action. It begins with small action repeated consistently. Let's talk about that. Chapter 5: Small actions create massive momentum. Most people fail not because their goals are too big. They fail because their first step is too big. They look at the mountain and feel overwhelmed. Write a book, build a business, transform your body, master a new skill. The goal feels enormous, so their brain responds with hesitation. I'll start later. I need more time. I need more preparation. But the problem isn't the dream. The problem is the size of the first step. That's the key, because success rarely begins with massive action. It begins with small action repeated consistently. Small actions today become unstoppable momentum tomorrow. Remember that. Let's talk about the 1% action rule. This rule is simple. Instead of trying to transform your life overnight, you improve by just 1% each day. 1% may sound insignificant, almost meaningless, but over time that small improvement becomes powerful because progress compounds. Think about interest in a bank account. A small amount growing steadily becomes something substantial over time. Your habits work the same way. One small action today, another tomorrow, another the next day. Day by day, the results begin to accumulate, but the key is consistency, not intensity. You have a choice. You can chase dramatic bursts of effort, or you can build quiet consistency, and quiet consistency wins every time. That's the key. Most people approach change the wrong way. They try to overhaul their entire life in one day. They create extreme workout plans. They attempt massive work schedules. They demand perfection from themselves immediately, and for a few days they push hard. Then reality appears. They get tired. They get busy. They get discouraged. And the entire system collapses. Why? Because the plan was unsustainable. It's not about intensity. It's about discipline. The discipline to take small steps every day, even when those steps feel insignificant, because those steps accumulate. Small actions today become unstoppable momentum tomorrow. Let's look at a simple example. Imagine someone who wants to become a writer. Writing an entire book feels overwhelming, so they delay. They wait for long blocks of free time. They wait for inspiration. They wait for the perfect moment. But the perfect moment rarely arrives. Now imagine a different approach. Instead of waiting, they write 300 words every day. That's it. Just 300 words. Some days it feels easy, other days it feels slow, but they continue, and something remarkable happens. After 1 month, they have written nearly 9,000 words. After 6 months, over 50,000 words. After 1 year, they have written enough for an entire book, not through massive bursts of effort, through small daily actions. That's the key. Small actions today become unstoppable momentum tomorrow. The same principle applies to skill development. Think about learning a language. Many people attempt extreme study sessions. They study intensely for a few days, then they burn out, and the learning stops. But someone who studies just 20 minutes every day builds something powerful: consistency. After 1 year, those 20 minutes add up to more than 120 hours of learning. That's real progress. Not because the sessions were dramatic, but because they were consistent. You have a choice: short bursts of motivation or long-term discipline, and discipline always wins. Now let's talk about the compounding effect of effort. Most people underestimate how powerful time can be. 1 hour of focused work may not feel impressive today, but 1 hour every day becomes something massive. 1 hour per day equals 7 hours per week. 7 hours per week becomes over 350 hours per year. Think about that. 350 hours invested in one skill. One project, one goal. That level of repetition produces transformation, not overnight, but inevitably, because time amplifies consistent effort. That's the key. Small actions today become unstoppable momentum tomorrow. Momentum is not built through giant leaps. It's built through inches. 1 inch forward today, another inch tomorrow. Another the next day. Most of the progress will feel invisible at first. You won't notice dramatic change immediately, and that's where many people quit. They expect fast results, immediate rewards, visible transformation, but the real process is quieter than that. Progress builds slowly, then suddenly. Think about physical fitness. At the beginning, workouts feel uncomfortable. Results are subtle. The mirror barely changes, but week after week, small improvements accumulate. Strength increases, energy improves, confidence grows. Then one day, the change becomes undeniable, all because of consistent effort. Small actions today become unstoppable momentum tomorrow. Here is something powerful to understand. Small actions defeat resistance. Your brain resists large, intimidating tasks, but small tasks feel manageable. Writing 1 page, doing 10 push-ups, spending 15 minutes learning, those actions feel doable. And once you begin, momentum often carries you further than expected. But even if it doesn't, the habit is still reinforced. That's the key, because habits shape identity, and identity shapes your future. You don't become successful through one heroic effort. You become successful through repeated small decisions. You have a choice. You can wait for big breakthroughs, or you can build small daily victories, and those victories will compound. Now let's turn this into something practical. Start shrinking your actions. Don't ask, how can I achieve everything today? Ask a better question. What is the smallest step I can take right now? Write 1 paragraph, send 1 email, practice 1 skill, improve 1 detail. Small, manageable, repeatable. That's how momentum begins, not with dramatic changes, with simple actions repeated consistently. And here's the surprising part. Once momentum begins, effort feels lighter. Tasks that once felt difficult become routine. Discipline becomes habit. Habit becomes identity, and identity becomes destiny, all because you respected the power of small actions. Small actions today become unstoppable momentum tomorrow. That's the key. Remember this. Big dreams are achieved through small daily behaviors, not giant bursts of effort, not occasional motivation, but steady, disciplined movement. Day after day, week after week, year after year. You don't need their permission. You don't need perfect conditions. You need consistency, because consistency compounds. And once momentum builds, it becomes one of the most powerful forces in your life. You stopped waiting for motivation. You understood the silent cost of delay. You discovered that clarity comes from action. You learned that imperfect starts beat perfect plans. And now you understand the hidden power of small actions. But there is still one force that stops people from moving. Fear. Fear of failure. Fear of judgment. Fear of uncertainty. And until you understand how to handle fear, hesitation will always return. So let's confront it directly. Chapter 6. Fear shrinks when you move. Fear feels powerful. It feels heavy. It feels convincing. It feels real. But most of the time, fear is not the enemy you think it is. Fear is often just a signal. A signal that you are standing at the edge of growth. But here's what most people misunderstand. Fear does not disappear through thinking. Fear disappears through movement. That's the key, because fear thrives in stillness. When you remain inactive, your mind begins to imagine. It creates scenarios, worst-case outcomes, embarrassment, failure, rejection. The longer you stay still, the more detailed these fears become. Your brain becomes a movie director, and every scene it produces is negative. That's the trap, because imagination without action always exaggerates danger. You have a choice. You can sit still and let fear grow. Or you can move and watch fear shrink, because fear feeds on hesitation, but it weakens in motion. Think about a simple example: public speaking. Many people fear it more than almost anything else. Before they speak, their mind begins racing. What if I forget my words? What if I embarrass myself? What if people judge me? The fear grows larger and larger, but something interesting happens once the person actually begins speaking. After the first few sentences, the fear begins to fade. Their breathing stabilizes, their focus improves, their confidence rises. Nothing magical happened. They simply started. Action interrupted fear. That's the key. Fear thrives in stillness, but it shrinks when you move. Now let's talk about how the mind actually works. Your brain is designed to protect you. Thousands of years ago, survival depended on caution. Danger could appear anywhere. So the brain developed a powerful alarm system. Fear. That system still exists today, but the world has changed. You're rarely facing life-threatening danger, yet your brain still treats unfamiliar situations as if they might be deadly. Starting a business feels risky. Publishing creative work feels risky. Trying something new feels risky, so your brain activates fear. But here's the important part. Your brain learns from experience. Every time you take action and survive the outcome, the brain updates its understanding. It begins to realize something powerful. This situation is not dangerous. Confidence begins to grow. Fear begins to shrink. That's how the mind is reprogrammed. Through action, not through thinking. Action reprograms the mind. That's the key. Let's look at another example. Someone wants to start exercising, but they feel intimidated by the gym. They imagine judgment. They imagine embarrassment. They imagine not knowing what to do, so they delay. And while they delay, the fear grows. But imagine something different. They decide to go to the gym for just 10 minutes. They walk inside. They do a simple workout, and then they leave. Nothing terrible happens. No one judges them. No one even pays attention. And suddenly the fear begins to shrink. The second visit feels easier. The third visit feels familiar. Within a few weeks, the place that once felt intimidating now feels normal. Why? Because action rewired the brain. Fear lost its power. You have a choice. Let fear grow through hesitation or shrink it through experience. Now let's destroy one of the biggest myths about courage. Most people believe courage must come first. They think they must feel brave before they act, but that belief is backwards. Courage is not the beginning, it is the result. Courage appears after action. That's the key. Courage is built through evidence. Evidence that you can handle discomfort. Evidence that you can survive mistakes. Evidence that you can learn from experience. But that evidence only appears after movement. Courage is not required to start. Courage appears after you start. Remember that. Look at people who seem fearless. Entrepreneurs, athletes, performers, creators. From the outside, they appear confident, unshakable, but they were not born that way. They developed courage through repetition, through exposure, through countless moments where they acted despite uncertainty. At the beginning, they felt fear too. Everyone does. The difference is simple. They moved anyway. And every time they moved, fear lost a little more power. That's the key. Fear does not disappear before action. Fear disappears because of action. Let's make this practical. When fear appears, most people do one of two things. They retreat or they wait. They tell themselves they will act when the fear disappears. But that strategy never works, because waiting strengthens fear. Instead, you must train yourself to respond differently. When fear appears, you move, even if the step is small, even if the step is uncomfortable, because movement interrupts fear's control. You don't need their permission. You don't need perfect confidence. You need motion. That's how fear loses its authority over your decisions. Here is a simple rule. Shrink the action. Fear grows when tasks feel overwhelming, but small actions weaken resistance. Make the phone call, send the message, publish the post, try the idea. One small step, then another, then another. and each step rewires your mind, because the brain learns through experience, not imagination. Action reprograms the mind, that's the key. Understand this clearly. Fear will appear again, it always does. New challenges bring new uncertainty. New opportunities bring new discomfort. But once you understand how fear works, it stops controlling you. You recognize it for what it is, a signal. A moment of growth, an invitation to move. You have a choice. Listen to fear and remain still, or move forward and let courage grow. Because courage is not something you wait for. Courage is something you build, through action, through repetition, through movement. Courage is not required to start. Courage appears after you start. And once you learn to move despite fear, something powerful happens. Your world expands, opportunities appear, confidence grows. The things that once felt impossible begin to feel manageable, all because you refused to stay still. You chose movement, you chose progress, you chose growth. That's the key. You stopped waiting for motivation. You understood the silent cost of delay. You discovered that clarity comes from action. You learned that imperfect starts beat perfect plans. You saw how small actions create massive momentum. And now you understand that fear loses its power the moment you move. But movement requires something even more important: discipline. Because motivation fades, confidence fluctuates, but discipline creates consistency, and consistency builds unstoppable progress. So let's talk about the skill that separates dreamers from achievers. Chapter 7: The Discipline of Immediate Action. Most people lose their opportunities in the same way, not through failure, through hesitation. A good idea appears, a moment of inspiration, a spark of possibility, and instead of acting, they pause, they think about it, they analyze it, they wait. And during that waiting, something dangerous begins to happen. Doubt, questions appear, excuses appear, fear appears, and the energy that once felt powerful slowly fades away. That's how most dreams die, not with a loud crash, but with quiet hesitation. That's the key. Because the window between idea and action is incredibly small. If you don't move quickly, your mind will talk you out of it. You have a choice: act immediately or let hesitation take control. High performers understand something most people never realize. Speed is power, not reckless speed. Not careless speed, but decisive speed. The ability to move when an idea appears. The ability to act before doubt grows stronger. The ability to begin before excuses arrive. Because hesitation is the enemy of progress. Every second you delay, your brain begins building resistance. It starts calculating risks, imagining judgment, predicting failure, and the longer that process continues, the harder action becomes. That's why successful people train themselves to move quickly. They capture ideas immediately. They take the first step immediately. They begin the process immediately, because they understand something simple. The faster you begin, the faster you learn. That's the key. Think about an entrepreneur with a new idea. The average person does this. They write the idea down. Then they research for weeks. They analyze competitors. They watch videos. They read articles. They wait until everything feels perfect. But during that time, nothing real happens. The idea remains theoretical. Now look at someone who practices immediate action. They test the idea quickly. They create a simple version. They share it with real people. They gather feedback. Within days or weeks, they already know something valuable. Does it work? Does it need improvement? Should they pivot? They learned faster. Why? Because they moved faster. The faster you begin, the faster you learn. That's the key. Now let's talk about a simple tool that can change your behavior instantly: the 5-minute rule. This rule is incredibly powerful because it bypasses the brain's resistance. Here's how it works. When you feel resistance toward a task, you make a simple agreement with yourself. You will work on the task for just 5 minutes, not an hour, not the entire project, just 5 minutes. Anyone can tolerate 5 minutes. Your brain stops resisting because the commitment feels small. So you begin, and something interesting happens. Once you start, the resistance fades, focus appears, momentum begins. 5 minutes often becomes 15, 15 becomes 30, and suddenly you're fully engaged in the work. But none of that would have happened if you waited for motivation. You tricked your brain into starting. That's the key. It's not about motivation, it's about discipline. Let's make this practical. Imagine you need to write something important. Your brain resists. It says you're tired. It says you'll do it later. It says you need the right mood. But instead of listening to those excuses, you apply the 5-minute rule. You open the document. You start writing. 5 minutes, that's all. And once you begin, something changes. Your mind engages. Ideas begin to flow. Momentum builds, and the task that once felt impossible suddenly feels manageable. All because you started. You have a choice. Wait for motivation or use discipline to begin. This rule works everywhere. Exercise, work, creativity, learning. If the task feels overwhelming, shrink the starting point. Commit to 5 minutes. Commit to the first step. Commit to the smallest possible action, because starting is the hardest part. Once movement begins, momentum takes over. That's the key. Now let's talk about speed again. Speed creates advantage, not because fast people are reckless, but because fast people learn sooner. Every action produces feedback. Feedback produces improvement. Improvement produces progress. So the person who acts quickly experiences more learning cycles, more feedback, more growth. The slow thinker remains stuck in analysis. The fast mover gathers real-world information. That's why speed is powerful. The faster you begin, the faster you learn. Think about someone learning a new skill. 2 people start at the same time. One person waits for the perfect conditions. They study, they analyze, they prepare endlessly. The other person starts practicing immediately. They make mistakes, they learn from them, they adjust. 6 months later, the difference is obvious. The second person has real experience, real skill, real confidence. The first person still has theories, because learning happens through action, not preparation. That's the key. But immediate action requires discipline, because your brain will always suggest delay. It will offer comfortable alternatives, scrolling, distractions, excuses, and every time you accept those alternatives, hesitation becomes stronger. But every time you act immediately, something powerful happens. You strengthen a new habit, the habit of execution, the habit of movement, the habit of progress. You train your mind to respond differently. When an opportunity appears, you move. When an idea appears, you test it. When resistance appears, you start anyway. You don't need their permission. You don't need perfect confidence. You need discipline, and discipline grows through repetition. Every time you start quickly, hesitation loses power. Every time you act immediately, your brain becomes more comfortable with action. Soon it becomes natural. You stop overthinking every step. You simply begin, and that single change transforms your entire life, because most opportunities belong to the people who act first, not the people who think the longest. Remember this, ideas are everywhere, opportunities are everywhere, but they reward people who move. You have a choice. You can analyze forever, or you can begin now, because action produces experience. Experience produces clarity. Clarity produces success. And the faster you start that cycle, the faster your life changes. The faster you begin, the faster you learn. That's the key. You stopped waiting for motivation. You understood the silent cost of delay. You discovered that clarity comes from action. You learned that imperfect starts beat perfect plans. You saw how small actions create massive momentum. You realized that fear shrinks when you move, and now you understand the power of immediate action. But there is another hidden trap that keeps people stuck: preparation, endless preparation, courses, research, planning. It feels productive, but often it hides the same problem: avoiding real work. So now it's time to confront that illusion. Chapter 8: Stop preparing and start producing. Preparation can be useful, but it can also become a trap, a comfortable trap, a socially acceptable trap, a trap that looks like progress but produces nothing. This trap has a name: preparation addiction. It's the habit of learning, researching, and planning endlessly, while avoiding the one thing that actually creates results: production. That's the key. because preparation feels productive, but production is productive. Preparation feels safe. Production feels exposed. Preparation keeps you in theory. Production puts you in reality. And reality is where progress actually happens. You have a choice. You can keep preparing or you can start producing. Look around at how many people are stuck in preparation mode. They buy courses, they watch tutorials, they read books, they attend workshops, they gather information endlessly. But their projects remain unfinished. Their ideas remain unrealized. Their goals remain theoretical because preparation has become a substitute for action. It gives the illusion of movement, but it avoids the discomfort of execution. That's the trap. Preparation feels productive. Production actually is. Remember that. Think about someone who wants to start a business. They begin researching. They study marketing strategies. They analyze successful companies. They watch hours of content about entrepreneurship. It feels like progress, but months pass, sometimes years, and the business still doesn't exist. No product, no customers, no experience, just information. But information alone does not create success. Execution does. That's the key, because knowledge without action is powerless. It's not about intelligence. It's about discipline. The discipline to move from learning to doing. Now let's be clear. Preparation is not the enemy. You do need some knowledge, some strategy, some understanding, but preparation should serve production, not replace it. Preparation should be brief, focused, purposeful. Then action should begin, because the most valuable lessons appear during execution, not before. Production builds skill. Think about learning to swim. You could read every book about swimming, study every technique, watch hundreds of instructional videos, but until you enter the water, you will never truly learn, because swimming is not a theory, it's an experience. The same is true for almost every meaningful skill: writing, business, public speaking, leadership, creativity. You learn by doing, you learn by failing. You learn by adjusting, and each attempt makes you stronger. Production builds skill, that's the key. Let's talk about the power of output. Output is the real teacher. When you produce something, the world responds. You get feedback, you see results, you discover weaknesses, you identify strengths. That feedback becomes your education. Think about someone who wants to become a better writer. They could spend years studying writing techniques, but the person who writes every day improves faster. Why? Because every piece of writing reveals something. What works, what doesn't, what needs improvement. The act of producing content creates clarity. That's why output is so powerful. Preparation feels productive. Production actually is. The same principle applies to creative work. Artists improve by creating art. Musicians improve by playing music. Filmmakers improve by making films, not by endlessly studying theory, but by practicing their craft. Every piece of work becomes a lesson. Every project becomes a classroom, and every mistake becomes a teacher. That's the key, because mistakes are not failures, they are information. But that information only appears when you produce something real. Now let's confront something uncomfortable. Preparation often hides fear. Fear of judgment, fear of failure, fear of imperfection. So people stay in the learning phase because learning feels safe. No one criticizes someone who is still preparing. But the moment you produce something, you become visible. Your work can be evaluated, judged, rejected. And that vulnerability scares people. So they delay, they keep researching, they keep planning, they keep preparing. But preparation cannot protect you forever. Eventually, you must produce. You have a choice. Stay comfortable in preparation or step into the discomfort of creation. You don't need their permission. You need courage. And discipline, here's a powerful rule. Learn a little, then build something. Learn a little more, then build something better. That cycle creates progress. Learning followed by production. Production followed by improvement. That's how real skill develops, not through endless preparation, through repeated execution. Imagine someone who wants to learn photography. They could spend months studying camera settings, lighting techniques, editing software. But the person who improves fastest does something different. They take photos, hundreds of photos, thousands of photos, some are bad, some are average, some are surprisingly good. But each photo teaches something: angle, lighting, timing, composition. The skill grows because production is constant. Preparation feels productive. Production actually is. That's the key. Now ask yourself an honest question. Are you preparing or producing? Are you consuming information or creating something real? Are you studying endlessly or applying what you already know? Because the truth is simple. You already know enough to begin, not enough to master the process, but enough to start. And starting is where the real education begins. You have a choice: stay in theory or step into reality. Because reality teaches faster, reality gives feedback, reality creates growth. So here is a practical shift you must make. Set a rule for yourself. For every hour you spend learning something, spend at least an hour producing something. Write something, build something, test something, create something. Because production transforms knowledge into skill, and skill creates opportunity. That's the key. Understand this clearly. The world rewards creators, not researchers, not planners, not perpetual students, creators, people who build, people who ship, people who produce. Because production moves ideas from imagination into reality. And reality is where success lives. Preparation feels productive. Production actually is. Remember that. You stopped waiting for motivation. You understood the silent cost of delay. You discovered that clarity comes from action. You learned that imperfect starts beat perfect plans. You saw how small actions create massive momentum. You realized that fear shrinks when you move. You practice the discipline of immediate action, and now you understand the trap of endless preparation. But there is one final transformation that happens when action becomes consistent. Something powerful begins to change: your identity. Because when you act repeatedly, you stop seeing yourself as someone who wants success. You start seeing yourself as someone who creates it, and that identity shift changes everything. Let's talk about that. Chapter 9: Identity is built through action. Most people think success is about goals. It's not. Goals are temporary. Identity is permanent. A goal says, I want to write a book. An identity says, I am a writer. A goal says, I want to get in shape. An identity says, I am someone who trains. That difference changes everything, because goals rely on motivation. Identity relies on behavior. And behavior is what creates transformation. That's the key. You do not become successful by wishing for it. You become successful by becoming the type of person who acts like it. And that process begins with repeated action. You become what you repeatedly do. Look closely at how identity actually forms. It does not appear overnight. It builds slowly, through patterns, through habits, through repeated behavior. Every time you act in a certain way, you send a signal to your brain. This is who I am. When someone writes every day, their brain begins to accept something. I am a writer. When someone exercises consistently, another signal appears. I am an athlete. When someone builds projects and takes risks, a new identity forms. I am someone who creates. Identity follows behavior, not the other way around. That's the key. Most people try to reverse the process. They wait until they feel like a confident person before acting confidently. They wait until they feel like a disciplined person before building discipline. They wait until they feel like a creator before creating. But that strategy never works, because identity is built through evidence. Evidence comes from action. You have a choice: wait for a new identity to appear, or build it through your behavior. Think about someone who wants to become a writer. At the beginning, they hesitate to call themselves one. They say things like, I'm trying to write, I'm thinking about writing a book, I'm learning to write. Why? Because their identity hasn't caught up yet. But imagine they write every day, day after day, week after week, month after month. Eventually something changes. They stop saying, I'm trying to write. They begin saying, I write. The identity shifts, not because they decided it mentally, but because their actions made it true. You become what you repeatedly do. That's the key. This is the moment when a dreamer becomes a doer. The moment action becomes daily. not occasional, not dependent on motivation, but consistent, because dreaming requires imagination, doing requires discipline. And discipline reshapes identity. Think about someone who dreams of starting a business. For years they talk about ideas, they discuss possibilities, they imagine success, but nothing changes. They remain a dreamer. Now imagine the moment they begin acting daily. They build a product, they talk to customers, they test ideas, they adjust strategies. Suddenly they are no longer dreaming, they are building. That's the transition from dreamer to doer, and it happens through action. But here's something even more powerful. Action does not only change your identity internally, it changes how the world sees you. When you produce consistently, people notice. When you show up repeatedly, people respect it. When you build something real, opportunities appear. Action changes how the world sees you and how you see yourself. Remember that, because reputation follows behavior, not intention. The world does not reward people for what they plan. It rewards people for what they produce. That's the key. Let's look at another example. Fitness. Many people say they want to get in shape. They talk about workouts. They research nutrition. They imagine transformation. But the identity doesn't change. Why? Because the behavior hasn't changed. Now imagine someone who trains consistently, 3 days a week, every week, month after month. At first, it feels uncomfortable, but eventually something shifts. They stop seeing themselves as someone who is trying to get fit. They begin seeing themselves as someone who trains, an athlete, a disciplined person. The identity follows the habit. You become what you repeatedly do. Now understand this. Identity can work in both directions. Positive habits build powerful identities, but negative habits build limiting ones. If someone repeatedly avoids challenges, they begin seeing themselves as someone who quits. If someone constantly delays action, they begin seeing themselves as someone who procrastinates. If someone repeatedly breaks promises to themselves, they begin believing they lack discipline. That's the danger, because identity becomes a self-fulfilling cycle. The behaviors reinforce the belief. The belief reinforces the behaviors. So if you want to change your identity, you must change your actions. Not once, not occasionally, but repeatedly. That's the key. Here's something powerful you must understand. You don't need to convince yourself that you are capable. You need to prove it to yourself through action. Every completed task becomes evidence. Every small victory strengthens your identity. Every moment of discipline reinforces the belief. I am someone who follows through. And that belief becomes incredibly powerful, because once your identity shifts, behavior becomes easier. A writer writes, an athlete trains, a builder builds. Not because they force themselves, but because it's who they are. So here is a simple transformation you can begin today. Stop focusing only on your goals. Start focusing on your identity. Ask yourself a better question. What would the person I want to become do today? If you want to become a writer, write today. If you want to become an entrepreneur, build something today. If you want to become disciplined, act with discipline today, because identity is built through evidence, and evidence is created through action. You don't need their permission. You don't need a title. You don't need recognition. You need behavior. Action changes how the world sees you and how you see yourself. That's the key. Remember this. Success is not a single moment. It is a pattern of behavior repeated over time. Each action becomes a vote for the person you are becoming. One vote may seem small, but thousands of votes create identity, and identity creates destiny. You have a choice. Vote for hesitation, or vote for action. Vote for excuses, or vote for discipline. Because the person you become is shaped by the actions you repeat. You become what you repeatedly do. Never forget that. You stopped waiting for motivation. You understood the silent cost of delay. You discovered that clarity comes from action. You learned that imperfect starts beat perfect plans. You saw how small actions create massive momentum. You realized that fear shrinks when you move. You practiced the discipline of immediate action. You escaped the trap of endless preparation. And now you understand that action builds identity, but there is one final truth that ties everything together. All of this power, all of this transformation, all of this progress lives in a single moment, today, because the future is not built someday. It is built right now. Let's bring everything together. Chapter 10, The Power of Today. Most people live as if life begins tomorrow. They tell themselves, I'll start next week. I'll start next month. I'll start when I feel ready. But here's the hard truth. Tomorrow is always theoretical. It doesn't exist yet. It is an idea. It is a possibility. The only real opportunity is today. That's the key. Everything you want, everything you dream of, begins in the present moment, not in motivation, not in perfect conditions, not in someone else's approval, but right now, you have a choice. Move today or delay and let life pass you by. The power of today comes from the decisions you make in this exact moment. Every choice shapes your trajectory. What you do now matters more than anything else. Check your excuses, check your distractions, check your hesitation. Because every minute you waste is a vote against the life you want to live. Every minute you act is a vote for your future. That's the key. The future is built in daily decisions. Think about someone who wants to transform their health. 1 hour of exercise today matters. Skipping it does not disappear, it compounds. Small choices repeated daily create massive results over time. Consistency is what separates those who dream from those who achieve. It's not dramatic effort. It's not occasional bursts. It's simple, repeated action. Take one healthy meal today. Do one workout today. Make one decision to move closer to your goal. Your future is built on these choices. You have a choice. Act now or postpone and watch the opportunity slip. Now let's consider your career. Many people wait for the right moment to take the next step. They wait for approval. They wait for certainty. They wait for resources, but certainty never comes. Resources never arrive perfectly. Approval is optional. The real movers act today. They send the email. They pitch the idea. They start the project. The faster they act, the faster they learn. And the faster they learn, the faster they grow. The future belongs to people who act now. Your future begins the moment you start. Let's talk about the now principle. This principle is simple. Your power is in the present. Your options are in the present. Your ability to create change exists right now. It's tempting to wait. It's tempting to plan endlessly. It's tempting to think the moment will arrive magically. It won't. Magic is a lie. The world does not pause for you. The clock keeps ticking. Every second you wait is a second lost. Every second you act is a second invested. Your future begins the moment you start. Think about someone building a business. They could plan for months. They could study endlessly. They could research every competitor. But while they wait, the market moves. Opportunities disappear. Competitors gain advantage. Now imagine a person who begins today. They launch a small version of their idea. They test it. They adjust it. They learn. Within weeks, they have experience. They have feedback. They have momentum, all because they acted today. Your future is created by action, not thought. You have a choice. Start now or remain in theory forever. Here's the real secret. Massive results are not built in big leaps. They are built in tiny, repeated actions, chosen deliberately today. One small effort today, another tomorrow, another the next day. Compound those efforts. Watch momentum grow. See your identity shift. The person who acts today is different tomorrow. The person who hesitates today is in the same place next year. Your life trajectory changes in the moments you take action. Every choice counts. Every decision matters. Every action builds momentum. Your future begins the moment you start. Let's take a look at your goals. Perhaps you want to write a book. 1 page today. Not the whole book, just 1 page. Perhaps you want to learn a skill. Practice for 20 minutes today. Not a perfect session, just a session. Perhaps you want to build strength. Do 10 push-ups today. Not a full workout, just 10 push-ups. Every small action adds up. Every small step compounds. Every completed choice strengthens your path. Your future begins the moment you start. Here's something most people never understand. Waiting never builds momentum. Hesitation never creates transformation. Planning alone never produces results. Only action creates results. The now principle is simple. Do something today. Do something meaningful. Do something that moves you closer to your goal. It doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't need to be monumental. It just needs to exist. Then repeat tomorrow, and the next day, and the day after that. Momentum grows, confidence grows, identity grows. Your future begins the moment you start. Let's reinforce this one last time. Today is your only opportunity. Tomorrow is theoretical. Yesterday is gone. What you do right now shapes everything. Small actions today, repeated daily, compound into transformation. Action creates clarity. Action builds momentum. Action defines identity. And the future belongs to the person who acts today. You have a choice. Act now or delay and watch life pass by. Do not wait for motivation. Do not wait for confidence. Do not wait for approval. Start. Your future begins the moment you start. You mastered motivation. You understood the cost of delay. You discovered clarity through action. You learned that imperfect starts beat perfect plans. You harnessed small actions into momentum. You faced fear and moved anyway. You practiced immediate action. You shifted from preparation to production. You built identity through action. And now you understand the ultimate truth. Today is all you have. Act today. Decide today. Move today. Because your life is created in moments and your future begins the moment you start. This is not theory. This is not philosophy. This is reality. Your moment is now. Start. Your future depends on it. You have now heard the truth that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Success is not complicated. It does not belong to the most intelligent person. It does not belong to the most talented person. And it certainly does not belong to the person who waits the longest to feel ready. Success belongs to the person who begins. The world is filled with unfinished ideas, abandoned goals, and dreams that never had a chance, not because they were impossible, but because someone delayed the first step. Remember this: clarity comes from action. Confidence comes from action. Momentum comes from action. Everything you want, every skill, every achievement, every transformation begins with a single decision. To start, not tomorrow, not when the timing feels perfect. Now, so here is your challenge. When this audiobook ends, choose one thing you have been postponing, just one, and begin immediately. Because the most powerful moment in your entire future is not someday. It is today. It is this hour. It is right now.